new construction.
All right, appreciate it. I just want to recognize that Councilor White has just joined us. Any questions from committee members? Councilor Hogan, Councilor White.
This is a women's health building, basically?
The proposal is to establish the women's health services within this building upon completion.
I'm okay with it.
You okay? All right, we're all set, and so we're good to move that on the agenda.
Thank you.
Let me express my apologies. Normally, as a rule, we're supposed to acknowledge department heads that are here, so I want to acknowledge the members of the administration or people from the administration. Frank Kaliva is here, Chief Financial Officer. The City Auditor is here. Also, Chief Mons, Fire Department. I believe I saw Chief Buckner come in from the Police Department. Also, Commissioner Robinson, DPW. I believe I see Eric Ennis and Neil Burke, Commissioner Collins from the administration, and hopefully I didn't miss anyone. Who's that hiding? Commissioner LaFave always hiding behind people. What else you say was there? Deputy Commissioner of Assessment. It's also, hey Matt, how you doing? All right, appreciate it. What's our next item? I'm talking to the real boss in this chamber, Mr. Conroy.
Two properties leased to Horse.
That's a good segue. Thanks, councilors. Matt OJ, assessment. So we came to you a couple of years ago for a 5-year lease for Forest to lease 515 Cannon Street. It's just a building. It's come to their attention that they could really use the vacant lot next door. They've been a great tenant, so we decided to enter into a mutual agreement to cancel the old lease, have a new 5-year lease agreement for the two properties, the vacant lot on West Brighton and 515 Cannon. They'll be responsible for all exterior maintenance, which is an improvement on the old one, and they should run through 2026. And, you know, typical dollar lease to a nonprofit, obviously.
Who is this applicant again?
So this is Force, which I believe is focusing our community's resources toward empowerment. Sorry if I mangled that acronym.
Got you, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
And the other one's the old Brighton Family Center, right?
Yeah.
Councilor White, Councilor Hogan?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. So we'll move that item onto the, Councilor Allen, you're okay with that? All right, thanks. So we'll move that item onto the agenda as well, as long as my other colleagues don't have any additional questions. All right. Next item?
$2 million.
All right, good morning, councilors. So this item has been presented to the committee a couple times on occasion. The latest revision, just a modification to the plan, would be instead of $1 million allocation for the American Rescue Plan Commercial Corridor Fund, some discussions with the councilors increasing that number to $2 million of an allocation to go up to that amount. So it's presented before you, and if there are no questions or concerns, would like to advance it forward.
Do we know when this is supposed to be implemented?
The implementation question. So we're looking at first quarter of 2022. So looking at January, February, that we'd formally be able to announce the program, the application process, and then begin receiving funding requests.
Thank you.
And this is still up to $5,000 or $5,000 increments?
So for the commercial corridor fund, this would go up to $100,000 as the maximum grant fund. That's going to be contingent upon the size of the project, the scale, but up to 50% of the project could be considered for that up to $100,000 amount.
I'd like to commend the administration to seeing the wisdom of doubling the amount of that allotment. And I also like to commend Councilor Bay, who's been championing the commercial corridors for a long time. So this is terrific. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, we have no pushback. And congratulations, Deputy Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
So, Councilor Hogan, I'm assuming you're good. And
Yes.
Councilor White? Yes. All right, we'll move the item forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I believe that was it for me, right, Mr. Conroy? All right.
Land bank, 421, for council announcement.
Hey, councilors, this is a straightforward transfer of 420 Merriman from the city to the land bank.
Sorry, what was the amount?
Oh, just typical 151.
Is this the one on Fernwood?
Oh, I'm sorry. Have I got the order mixed up? Okay, yeah. 13941 Fernwood. I think the council authorized that transfer in 2016. Subsequent to that authorization, the house was demolished. I believe a garage was demolished too, so we just have to change the description.
Any questions? All right, next. All right, and then the next one, the 139 West Pleasant, did you have that one as well?
I do, Councilor
Okay.
Allen, thanks. That was brought to council a couple months ago. Again, typical side lot sale. There was a handshake agreement to close up the curb cut and for the purchaser to pay for DPW to close up the curb cut, but it wasn't written into the contract. So now that has taken place, we're good to go. I think that cost an additional $700, $760.
So DPW did the curb cut, or she did it? She
They,
had to pay
they,
for
they
it?
did, and she'll reimburse. It's part of the contract terms. It's baked into the purchase price.
Okay. All right, any comments on that one? No? All right, and the next one is 420 Merriman Ave.
There's 420. Yeah, that's just a straightforward transfer from the city to the land bank for the typical sum of $151.
Okay. You good? You approve? Yes. All right, if Hoagie approves, then
Thanks all.
thank you. And I believe those were the only three that were emailed to me, Jim. Yes. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, we'll start the finance portion. So the first one is a resolution to send to New York State. And this one has to do with specifically Afghan refugees. So as we all know from the news, U.S. foreign policy has created a situation where there are refugees from Afghanistan that helped U.S. service members that are looking to be resettled in the United States. Syracuse is looking to have about 200 people that would potentially come to our city. And the White House and the State Department has created a program to help resettle these individuals called Sponsor Circles. And essentially what it does is it brings together 4 people that live near each other that would help acclimate people to our community. So it provides pantry food, it provides helping people to get to schools, and just in general helping them acclimate to Syracuse. The individuals that volunteer to participate and help the refugees have to raise about $2,700 per person to help provide the resources. So the idea here is that we would ask the state to allow municipalities to provide a tax credit of $275 per person that would want to participate, just to help ease the financial burden for people that would want to help refugees. So again, if all 200 people took advantage of this, you're looking at a total expense of about $55,000, which is, in the grand scheme of the city budget, not a huge expense. So again, this is something that we can't do locally without any sort of state changes. So this is just a request letter to the state to ask them to consider this change. So any questions on this item?
Yes, Councilor Green, so this is $275 to the owner of the house that harbors the folks that are going to live there, is that?
It doesn't necessarily have to be that someone is living in your house. It can be that they live in your neighborhood, and for example, 4 people that live near that person can all agree to be part of that sponsorship. So those people are then providing food or clothing. So it doesn't have to be residents in the house itself.
Yeah, I welcome these folks into Central New York, and I'm sure our community will welcome them, and I think they'll support them in any way, shape, or form, as far as financially or anything else. And I personally will help out. But I am not in favor of amending the tax code for anything but like what we currently have as far as veterans go and senior citizens. Although this is just a resolution, you know, and the state would have to act upon it to allow us to do it, I would much prefer us sort of like going along and encouraging and sponsoring and helping these folks as they come in. But I'm not in favor of amending the tax code. I think this is sort of a, could set a precedent that we might have to like deal with in the future. So that's just my personal opinion, so.
So I would just point out from in addition to the humanitarian reasons why I'm sure many of us have spoken to local small business owners, and the biggest problem with business in Syracuse right now is a lack of labor. That a lot of people are trying to hire people. There's not enough people that are willing to work. So I think from an economic perspective, the fact that Syracuse is so welcoming of new Americans is a real benefit to our culture, but also to our economy. And the reality is there's not a lot of ways city government can directly show that we're a welcoming community for this. And I'm open to other ideas if there's ways to do that besides providing this modest tax credit. But in my opinion, it is a good way to show that the city of Syracuse is a place that's welcoming to new Americans.
I think, I agree with you. I think we are welcoming to new Americans, and we have been historically, right from almost our inception. But when they weren't termed new Americans, they were just called immigrants. But I would just want to say that I think that the folks who are going to get involved in this are folks that you're going to get involved in whether they get a tax credit or not. I think there's good-hearted souls in this community that will be firmly behind this all the time. I think they're going to get all the help they needed. And I don't want to put an extra burden on the Department of Assessment to try to coordinate and collaborate and try to find out who deserves a tax credit or who doesn't deserve a tax credit. And I do think we have a lot of folks that do a lot of good deeds in this community. And, you know, Little League coaches, football coaches, there was an initiative back in the 1970s called Project Children, where thousands of young children came over to this country from Ireland during the Troubles over there. And the community accepted that and supported that. And so I think we're still going to support it. I'm just not in favor of it. I think this should be a private enterprise, and I don't believe that we should have anything to do with the tax code.
If I can add, Councilor Green, two things I always argue for is improving our tax-based performance and reducing unemployment, specifically for people who are native here. I always had an issue in the past when oftentimes the focus would be on attracting new talent, so to speak, oftentimes at the expense of the many people here who may remain or even be chronically unemployed, persons who may have had obsolete skill sets because of the closing of Carrier or Chrysler, Crucible Steel with their reductions in employment. So it certainly is a slippery slope, I think. I think it's a noble idea. Obviously, we're always, the very nature of this country is that, people from all over can find, a new opportunity here. But I think the ideas as presented, I don't know, it's a little shaky, I think. Anytime we're saying, or I think it's maybe a challenging idea for me to hear, we can solve our labor woes with new people when I get contacted by people all the time who are looking for employment. I think the biggest issue here in Syracuse is that we haven't done an excellent job at matching people with employment opportunities. Employers legitimately cannot find workers. Workers legitimately cannot often determine who's employing. And that exists a lot more than people think. So that's just my 2 cents on the issue. Those are concerns for me. And I don't know if there's further explanation or anything in addition that could be said that would further clarify. I think he did an excellent job clarifying it. But again, when it comes to our property tax performance, even though this is on the individual, and when it comes to our employment woes for people who live here or committed here, they're not planning to go anywhere. I think those people should be our first priority.
And if I could add one other thing to Counselor Bay's point, I don't think there's a city councilor on this dais that didn't receive phone calls from landlords, from business owners, from people like that during the pandemic, who said, you know, I've been closed for 6 months and I still have to pay my taxes. And us just saying, what can we do? We can't do anything. I mean, that happened to me dozens of times during the recent pandemic. So I think we've got to be cognizant of the times. Once again, I'm fully in support of welcoming these folks here. And I know people in this community will support them in a private way, but I don't think, this is a situation where I don't think amending our tax code is something we should consider.
Councilor Hogan, do you have any specific ideas of how we can go about being more encouraging from a public perspective?
I will publicly encourage you. I will join any effort.
But policy-wise, do you have any ideas?
I don't think this is a policy situation. I think this is a community situation.
It may just be a matter of asking for support from a local nonprofit, maybe to make up the difference, because you said it's what, 50,000?
Everyone did it, yep.
I agree as far as I don't want to reduce our tax base that we barely have already, but if there's a way that we can get the $55,000 from one of our local nonprofits, and maybe the sponsor circles are able to get like a stipend or something, I think that's
So the biggest thing I always remind people is this is a privately funded thing. Like, individuals are coming up with all the money. So the point here is, how do you create attention to let people know about this program? I would be pretty confident that no one in this room knew about this program before this came up, right? And that's kind of the point, is we're trying to make the public aware of how we can go about helping these people that have lived through really difficult situations, and how do we come together as a community. So if you guys, if people don't want to do this, that's your vote to do that, and I accept that. But the idea that we don't have the resources to, like, that this is a serious erosion of our tax base, I don't agree with that, personally.
Let me add this, one question, Councilor Green, for your consideration, and I don't know if we could find out. You know, how much discretion do we have with this idea, right? This is not a program we're creating, but do we have any ability for adjustment? And I don't know if you know that right off the top of your head, or if you have to look into that. Do we have any ability for adjustment? Can we have our version of a program, for example? But to respond, you know, that's my question.
So I can, it's this, so this is created by the White House and the State Department. So if we wanted to do a separate one, we could, but obviously the infrastructure is already in there from the federal government. That's why it makes sense to not recreate the wheel.
Understood. And while I understand that individuals will be ponying up their own money, I think any reduction in tax-based performance in this city is significant, you know, to be quite frank. One of the biggest arguments made over the years is the lack of funding to schools. A big part of that is the fact that our local contribution is minuscule because our tax base doesn't perform well. You know, so any hit to our tax base, especially, you know, one that is, at least in this particular, like, you know, a lot of people, for example, could buy into this program, then that would be a lot of people getting a tax break on their properties.
The only counter argument I would say is that new Americans buy houses, they spend money in the community, so it's a pretty small investment when you consider, you know, if a new American buys a house, like we know many that do, ultimately they're going to reinvest that money in the community. So I understand, but
I get that. It was argued by somebody before, I won't say who, that the sales tax was our new bottom line, and that particular argument was debunked because you can't really predict it as well from one year to year, especially when you consider we had a recent surge in sales tax. We don't know how that happened. We certainly appreciate it, even coming out of COVID, but it's without a doubt not our new bottom line, you know. So while we understand that they'll spend, and let me add this, I don't think that the main point is not to argue against more new Americans, because we all support that. It's the particular program, and at least the language that I heard, that creates concern for me. For example, you mentioned the dire situations with which they had to deal with and come through, which we understand, you know, but we have people living in deplorable conditions here. We have people who suffer with chronic unemployment here as well. We have shots fired in our city. We have a host of other things going on here too. And so it's tough to argue whose circumstance is tougher than whose. You know, it's just necessary that we give consideration to the fact that when we say, you know, there's a struggle to find employees, well, we can just bring in a group of people who would take those jobs. That's a long-standing argument that's been made for years, long before you and I got into government. I just think we have to take some consideration about how maybe we could, if we do have any discretion with how we can organize it, reword it, restructure it, and still get the benefit of being able to provide some support for people. I think we need to give that some consideration.
Okay. So I'm just going to assume, Councilor Hogan, Councilor Bay, you guys are a no on this item.
I'm a no too.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Sure, go ahead, Councilor.
You know, for me, as I listen to the conversation, I think it's important to know that as a city, certainly in the time I have been in the city, especially working for the city and being affiliated with the city since 2013, I think it's true to state that, you know, the city administration and the community has been a community that has been open to new Americans, starting with Mayor Minor, making this city a sanctuary city, and then after that, followed by Mayor Walsh, reasserting the effort. We have been a community that has always welcomed new Americans, and for me, as being a refugee myself, you know, it is soothing to know that the community that I live in is not just welcoming, but actually put action where their mouth is. And I think that's great. First, to just put that out there. Second to that, Councilor Green, I think the intention here, you know, follow that action that has been done by this community, and that is that we believe and we welcome and we sympathize with folks that are coming here looking and seeking, you know, better lives. And the intention is great, but I think the action in which we put it into tax base, for us, I think for me, it's kind of, it put me on a pause for a little bit. However, you talk about suggestion. I think for so many times, do we know the struggle here in the city? Yes, there are so many people here in our community that are struggling. But when you look at the amount of the struggle that newcomers go through, especially when I came here, it's harder. I would say it's harder. It's harder because you are starting with nothing. You are coming with nothing and you're starting with nothing. That's what makes it harder. So when people sympathize with folks like that, to kind of give them a hand to pick them up a little bit, I think I support that. And for me, I wouldn't go as far as amending the tax base, but what I would suggest is, I think it's time for us as a city and as leaders to start thinking about these people in terms of budgetary. We have organizations like RISE, Refugees, Immigrant Self-Empowerment. We have interfaith work. We have Catholic Charities that have been doing work for a long time in this community. And I think we are fortunate as a community to have three resettlement agencies in our community. And I think it's time for us to start giving them a hand. But I wouldn't go as far as amending tax base. But I am in support of some kind of monetary allocation every budget time, Councilor Green, to be able to help these people. That's where I would stand. But like our colleague said, I would be in support in whatever way if we can amend this, urging the administration and urging somehow within the local city to allocate a little bit to these organizations to continue to do the work they do. I'm sorry I took a long time, but thank you.
Thank you. Well said.
Look forward to those discussions. The next one is a Philadelphia Insurance. This is a settlement, which I will assume we'll discuss in executive session before our next meeting. Is everyone in the finance committee okay with this item?
Yes.
Next one is the school district budget amendment. Director Rudd.
Hello, counselors. So I'm just standing in place for the school district, so they're just recognizing additional revenue. It is 4 different types. So they're getting an increase in CURSA money of $2.6 million, which was the second round of stimulus they received. They're getting almost $4 million of ARPA. That was the stimulus from February 21. And then they're getting an additional 1.6 that they hadn't realized for CARES, which was the first federal stimulus that they received. And then they're increasing their shared revenue, which is from like the revenue sharing we do with the county via the state. We're involved in it too, for $4.5 million more than they had. And then they describe how they're going to spend it. Any questions on this?
Just to sort of illustrate Counselor Bay's point, when I first came on the council, I believe it was 2005, the city's budget was around $250 million, and the city school district's budget was around the same. And now it's the city school district's budget's $472 million after all these grants. So it's doubled in just basically 16 years. It's, the cost of education, and, of course, we still give $67 million, but our part of the school district budget just keeps on shrinking, and we have the maintenance of effort issue where we can never, ever go below what we ever give. And so it's just something to illustrate what Councilor Bay was saying in the previous conversation. Thank you, Director Rudd.
Any further questions on this item? The Finance Committee members can move this one on. Are you comfortable moving this item forward?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, next one is a change to the cut cleanup at 615 Oneida Street.
Hey, councilors. Looks like a board up cleanup charge was erroneously applied to the vacant lot at 615 Oneida. So we're just asking to change the tax roll to reflect that should not have been applied.
Any questions? No. Comfortable with this one? Okay. Matt, you can go to the next one, which is the Cushman Wakefield.
So we're asking for a waiver from the RFP process for professional services for this. We cast our usual solicitation for bids out there, only received one, and it was in excess of $10,000. It's $12,000 plus an additional $500 an hour for trial prep. This is for a property at 744 to 54 West Genesee, and a couple additional parking parcels on Belden, I believe. 2 tax years are at question. This is unusually high. I think it would be probably, in the interest of candor, I think I should say that we expect to see more of these in the future between Interstate 81 and some other related projects. The appraisal industry is dramatically increasing their fees, but this is pretty unusual for just 2 years to get a $12,000 quote. But we do need this to go to court, so we would like permission to proceed.
So Matt, is there an ongoing proceeding?
Yes, they are suing us on tax years 21 and 22. This was initiated, I believe, in March or April of 20.
And these services are necessary to provide the city an adequate defense?
Yeah, we don't have an appraisal exchange date set yet, but opposing counsel is very anxious to set one. We anticipate moving forward as quickly as we can, hopefully in the first quarter of 22.
Thank you.
And yeah, without that, we wouldn't be able to defend our position at trial.
Well, if we're going to spend this, we better win, huh?
Indeed. and otherwise, Councilor Hogan, we are confident.
Any other questions on this item? Everyone comfortable with this?
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one is renewal of agreement with ePlansoft.
Councilors, Jake Dishaw is out sick today, so I'll be covering this one. In 2020, you all authorized us to go to contract for ePlansoft, which is the review software for our permitting staff. Frankly, this is what allowed us to be functional during the beginning of COVID when most permanent departments around us were not functional. It's been highly successful within what you authorized last year. It included the option to come back to you for 2 one-year renewals. This is the first option for that, so we're asking for permission to enter into contract again on that first of those renewals.
Everyone comfortable with this? Yes. Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Next one is the waiver of bid for the snow clearing sidewalks.
Good morning, Council. I do have some handouts before we get going. That's next year. So what we have before us today is a waiver of competitive bid for the sidewalk snow clearing program. We did put this out to bid via the county this year, thinking that would be the appropriate route to go. It was not. We received no qualifying bids, and in discussions with contractors, they were unfamiliar with the county's requirements and the way that they structured the bid process. So we worked to structure a potential contract with our previous operator, who is JSK Snow Services, Inc. They have worked with the city in 2 previous seasons. They have hired city workers as part of their programs as machine operators to clear sidewalks. So the D&E for the contract is $650K, and that is a big number, but we plan for the worst imaginable winter possible. It's very, very, very likely we would be significantly less than that.
So do you know how they're going to determine the charges? You know, so you're saying it could be up to $650,000, but how is it going to be measured? The
Sorry?
cost, right? So is it per sidewalk, per foot, per mile?
Yeah, so there are fees for prep work, so we require the operator to go out and familiarize themselves with all routes, mark hazards, take notes of encroaching features that machine operators might encounter, as well as there are fees per deployment.
So Neil, can you clarify that for me? So when you were talking about the county, you put it out to bid with the county?
Yes, because it's a service, so we use the county's process.
Oh, okay. And so we're waiving the bid here, but you did put it out and just didn't receive any, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And again, I guess just from an outsider's perspective, I think we went through this last time, but if you could just refresh me, it seems like this would be something people in the city would be chomping at the bit for, to take this kind of work. But I guess the obstacle is the necessary investment in the equipment that's necessary to do it. Is that correct? Is that why we're not getting any bids on this?
That's correct. The environment that we're in now, I think we're all familiar with. Labor, skilled labor is tough to come by, but also equipment. So even if you have the money to outlay for this, you know, the capital outlay for equipment, you can't even get the stuff if you need it. So a lot of operators, if they were to come on new, add new routes to, you know, their existing contracts, they wouldn't be able to get the equipment necessary.
And what was the company we used in the past? JSK?
JSK.
And were we happy with the
We
service?
were. They were good. They've been a good partner over the years. They've worked with us as we've grown this network. So the map you have in front of you is a slight expansion over years past, and that's
been our MO since day one, is that we're going to continue to build on the program and add more where we can.
Who sets the priorities? I mean, as far as what goes first? I'm particularly interested in like Geddes Street, over the bridge between Erie Boulevard and West Fayette. That's always a problem, the kids who are north of walking the Fowler, north of Erie Boulevard. Does that get hit like first?
Yeah, so the arterials typically get hit first, and again, we work with the operator to make sure we have them on the highest traffic routes first. But they have multiple machines out at once. Yep. They have multiple machines out at once. It's not just one person in one machine going. There are multiple different start points.
It's supposed to be like arterial, schools, and hills, right?
Yep, we look for hills, schools, arterials, as well as known pedestrian generators, the senior centers, the stores, churches, you name it.
No, just for clarity, no bids, or I believe you said no bids that was understanding of the county process, right?
Right, so no bids. And in our discussions later, we learned contractors weren't familiar with the county's process.
Gotcha.
You know, are there going to be, or are there identification agreements?
Yes, so this was the biggest hurdle in the past, is that a lot of insurance companies, the underwriters are unfamiliar with this work, so the operator had to do a lot of legwork to get a contract in place, but general liability insurance as well as hold harmless for the city.
Awesome, thank you.
Moving forward, how do we change the fact that they're unfamiliar with the county's process? Is the county gonna roll something out to allow these contractors to be able to bid in the future?
That's our hope. We had a good experience working with the county this year and their team. So we're going to get to work earlier in the season and see if we can't pare this down or simplify some things. We do have pre-bid meetings where we invite people to come in. Maybe we can have additional or maybe less formal meetings, but we want as many players at the table as possible.
So in the future, it would be okay to have more than one contractor doing this?
Yeah, especially if we continue to expand the routes like we want to. Yeah, that's a possibility.
And Neil, is there like a cost per push in terms of your snow removal?
There is. It's a cascading cost. It's about $20,000 to begin with, and then it moves, it decreases with each number. And that's due to the fact that we can't predict the weather. And in the past, we've done about, we budget and we use about half of what we budgeted. So it's a little bit front loaded.
Bill, have we ever thought about a possibility of somehow, with all of these contractors, incorporating young people to be part of this in whatever way possible?
Well, we encourage, and we've worked with the operator in the past to hire city residents because they need to staff up in order to do this. But in terms of using, say, youth, you do have to be old enough to properly operate machinery. So it's not a shoveling process, which I think a lot of people assume.
Mm-hmm.
We get the calls from the seniors, especially, who say, "Hey, can you come shovel my driveway?" But it's a machine operator in a pretty serious piece of equipment. But we'll work with our contractor and encourage them. If there's apprenticeships or anything like that could be done, we're open to it.
Yeah, because I think as a community, we have always talked about, creating opportunities for the youth. And I understand that this is more automated than manual, right? And this could be an opportunity for our youth, because I know, I don't know if any of you know this, but I have kids that consistently come to my street looking to shovel. These are clearly kids that want to work, and I mean, it's unfortunate that we can't. There's an opportunity for them, yet our bureaucracy and process will not allow them to, to capitalize on their effort. And I just think that that's something we may want to look into for the future.
Sure, we don't want to get in the way of enterprising young adults by any means. I was definitely one of them. So this doesn't supersede adventurous youth.
kids aren't showing.
Tim Rod, Budget Director. Just a comment on the cost, especially since we're waiving it. I think it should be clear. So we're paying $32,000 toward the insurance up front. We pay $30,000 for the prep work, and then the 1st through 15th deployments are $28,000, and then it drops substantially to $10,000 per deployment after that. And then we have the cap on the contract. So the first getting started is the most expensive. That's really what the contractor needs to exist. And then I would just say, as Director of Procurement, I think we want to consider those options, but it is a trade-off because part of this municipal sidewalk stuff is we're driving the cost down. Right. So it's definitely most effective for the contractor to be able to essentially start their routes in the center or the out, wherever they're going to start, go, and then come all the way back in. And that's what makes it more affordable, even though it's still costly. So there are challenges to just having, and then like employing kids is different. So maybe there's ways we can get people to have access to hiring kids in their neighborhood without us being in that business. Any questions on the way that works?
Any other questions on this item?
Yeah, I was just wondering if the thought of the increase in the contract has affected living wage requirement.
Yeah, so that's part of it. They're required to pay a living wage.
Okay.
Yep, so I think we all know labor keeps going up every year. And this is essentially on-demand labor.
So that won't affect it from our end, that's on JSK's end?
Correct.
Other questions? Is there Finance Committee members comfortable moving this down?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim, those are my items.
I'm next, right, Mr. Conway? Parks. Commissioner, don't you have a big event coming up, Commissioner?
We sure do. Julie LaFave, Commissioner. It's the Home for the Holidays tree lighting.
It's 113th year, is it?
That sounds correct.
No, it's
I don't know. Only 2 years off, I think, that it's missed. Okay, so, yes, so I hope everybody comes out 6 p.m.
113
day
years.
after Christmas, Clinton Square. 2 items that are both related to each other, though. We have a long-standing relationship with Onondaga, or Office of Child and Family Services, OCFS. They fund us for programming that we do, after-school programming. During the pandemic, we weren't able to do as much programming, obviously, so they extended the contract, the amount of time for us to be able to do this so that we can be reimbursed. So one of these is to extend the contract with OCFS for this calendar year so that we can be reimbursed up to $8,500. Related to that is they have a partner agency that they don't want to fund directly OCFS. They'd rather reimburse the city directly. So that is, again, same programming, but reimbursement up to $19,000.
No, it sounds
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
One time when I was deputy commissioner, we hit the lights and the lights didn't come on. Not to make you nervous or anything, not to make you nervous. You better double check if those electricians are done with It's in for parts, right, Jimmy? I had been pulled out of the bullpen to do public works, correct, Mr. Penroy?
Yes, we're going to do public safety first.
Okay. Well, Rick Netherall's my good friend.
Well, is anybody from CRB here? Well, so CRB is getting a donation from Interfaith Work for $45. And that's what we got on the agenda, so $45.
Where from?
And
Where from is the donation?
Interfaith work. Yeah. It is from the Center for Dialogue. Yeah, yeah.
We take all free money, no matter how much.
Anything helps. Anybody got questions? No. All right. That is that, and then we have an item for fire department. Chief Ma? One. Wait, is there one?
Good morning, councilors. How's everybody doing?
Good.
I'm Michael Mons, the fire chief. This item is for me to respectfully ask for your permission to apply for a grant with FEMA to secure $200,000, and we would use that money to buy hoses and nozzles that go on our fire trucks to fight fires. Since I've been a fire chief, I think we've secured over $5 million in grant money, so we're just gonna keep aggressively looking for ways to get more free money from other entities besides ourselves. So does anybody have any questions? Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks, Chief.
Chief, your men and women have been very busy right now, so.
Yes.
Be safe over this holiday season. I know you're always on the scene, so God bless you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
Chief, I know we don't say a lot on that, but you're doing very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
On behalf of our department, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Holden. Lieutenant Williams here?
Afternoon, councilors.
Hi, Lieutenant. How are you?
Syracuse, please. How are you?
Welcome. Yeah. Welcome.
Hi.
Yeah. So we have an item here for the JAG item.
Yep.
Yeah. Could you just go over it just
For
a
the
little bit?
phototype?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was here, well, virtually, in front of the council in the spring for one of these photokites. It is basically a camera on a tether. It looks like a drone, but it has no lateral ability to fly it around. It can only go up or down. And it has a camera on it, and it also has an infrared camera. I run our emergency management for the police department, all things natural disasters, all things terrorism. So there's multiple uses for this. We are asking for a second one with this JAG grant.
So that's what the 54,000 will be spent on?
I'm sorry, sir?
That's what the 54,000 will be spent on?
Oh, no, it's 24,000 just for this specific item. I think there's other items in the grant that Chief Schaaf is gonna cover.
Stationary, or is it something that you would be able to move to different locations?
You can move it. It comes in like a Pelican case, a hard plastic Pelican case. It requires power, so as long as you have it plugged into power, it can stay up forever. There's no time limit on, a typical drone runs on battery and they can fly them around wherever. This, you can't fly it around. It only goes up or down.
Gotcha.
And that's it.
So what type of situations would this type of drone be
Well,
valuable
I
in?
envision things like, you have a missing kid somewhere in the park. Let's say Schiller Park, you send it up in the middle of the park. It does have an infrared camera on it as well, picks up heat signatures, building collapse. I mean, the possibilities are endless with this thing.
Or can it see around?
It can, I don't know the exact numbers, but it can zoom in quite a ways. We had a demonstration done a few months ago where they brought it out to the police station and showed it to us, and it was a pretty powerful zoom capability. So I certainly think it'd be pretty useful. Chief Cecil did present it to the Surveillance Technology Committee, and it passed there unanimously for the first one.
Is this something that is stationed, or does it move around?
Yes,
Do you
no,
change
it can't move around. Well, it's in a Pelican case, so wherever you set it up and plug it in, its only option is to go up. And it can go up to 150 feet.
But you can change its location to anywhere you
Correct,
want
so you
to.
can set it back down, pick the Pelican case up, and drive a half mile down the road and do the same thing again. That's correct.
And the department already has one in use?
Well, we don't have it yet. We've placed the order. We're
Placed
waiting
the
to get
order.
it, but this is just a request for a second one.
Okay.
Other questions?
No, sir.
All right, I think Jim, that's it for, yes.
I just have a question on what the
All right,
additional
Lieutenant.
24,000 is going to be spent on. So that one item is 24,000. Yeah. But he was going to move on completely.
We have one other item for finance.
Yeah.
Please, thank you.
So there's more items attached to that grant. What it's US DOJ JAG grant. We split it 50-50 with the Sheriff's Department. So the photo kite was one item. Another item is 2 body-worn cameras for IAD defender shields, which are ballistic shields. 3 of those. Niche. So to take any federal grant, currently we have to do a certain percentage, which is $1,620 for training. That's just something because we're not NIBRS compliant. When we become NIBRS compliant, we won't have to do this no more. But it's just a requirement for the grant that we have to do some training. So we have $1,620 set aside for that. And we also have $5,000 out of that grant for training for the CRB. So the total of that is around $54,100, I believe.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Are we good to push these forward?
Yes.
All right. That's it for me, Jim. Thank you.
Sure, Corey. Sorry, I just missed this. I had this item, but go ahead, Corey.
That's okay. Good afternoon, councilors. Corey Driscoll-Dunham, Chief Operating Officer. So this is a request for legislation to appropriate $500,000 of ARPA funding to provide financial support to Syracuse homeowners for costs related to sidewalks. So this would cover both, provide assistance for both homeowners who have remaining balances on sidewalks that they had completed underneath the city's previous sidewalk program, but also address homeowners in need of assistance for the fee associated with the municipal sidewalk program. I can hand them out when I'm done or now, just some data in terms of how many property owners still have a remaining balance for their sidewalk, what the average amount is. We anticipate the initial eligibility, at least as proposed in the legislation, would be for those homeowners who are living in a qualified census tract as designated by Arpa, which I also brought a copy of the map in case folks are interested.
How far back are you guys gonna go?
If whoever still has a remaining balance on there. So, and it's also, Counselor, it's also broken down by year on here in terms of how many people per year, there 104 people are carrying a balance from the 15-16 year, 78 are carrying from the following year. And so that would, so either folks who are living in a qualified census tract or can demonstrate a financial hardship as a result of the COVID pandemic, and Home Headquarters has this infrastructure in place. They, have the ability to assess those qualifications. And so this is really, providing additional funding to Home Headquarters to administer funds specific to this need.
Corey, is there any other means testing involved in this? So, I mean, because, a person, per se, that makes $100,000, right, but still has a balance for some reason, because they come take advantage of this if they could prove a hardship?
So I think we tried to, we tried to address this through the qualified census tracts identified by ARPA, just because we, as designated by there, I would assume that there were some sort of income qualifications for that census tract that urged the feds to select that as the areas in the greatest need. But then also for folks who are not in one of those qualified census tracts, if they can demonstrate that they were financially impacted by COVID, Home Headquarters has that ability, as they're doing right now, to assess that. But obviously we are open to, other suggestions about eligibility, either with this initial amount of funding, or as the program continues, if the demand ends up being greater than what we have in terms of supplying financial assistance, then, I'm sure I'm sure the administration would be open to another source of funding if we feel it necessary.
Are there any liens attached to it?
So, to the properties?
Yeah.
So the properties that we identified that are reflected here and who we would intend this money to be for would be owner-occupied 1- and 2-family residential properties that are not seizable. And there's a little debate about no open code violations, because open code violations could be that you need to rebuild your porch and you just can't do it right now, and you're going to do it in the spring. So, and out of the 694 properties that would be eligible for this, that meet that qualification, only 17 of them have open code violations. So we could also work with Home Headquarters to assess, you know, given, is it a sewer backup, or is it that, you know, your porch needs to be repaired and you just haven't been able to do it this season and you plan to do it in the spring, you know, and these are owner-occupied properties. Does that answer your question, Counselor?
Not really.
Okay. Feel free to say it didn't
if they
answer.
take the money out, if they do take the money, it's considered like a grant or whatever. So will there be a lien placed on their property for like, sometimes it's like 3 years, sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes 7 years? Like, will there be a lien?
Is the intention of that so that you don't take the money and then sell the house?
Right.
I would be, that's not something I had considered because you know, but, because presumably, hopefully, well, I guess in some case, if you sold your house, what you owe on your sidewalk could go to the next owner. It almost did for me. So I hadn't thought about that, but we can look into that, whether or not that would be something that we would do.
It doesn't, because then that makes it harder for the homeowner to sell if they
Right.
really wanted to.
Yeah, and these are, as you'll see in the handout, relatively reasonable. You know, these are not tens of thousands of dollars that people owe, so they're relatively small amounts. Obviously, you know.
Just a clarification, Court, is this 500,000 in addition to 4.5 that was approved earlier?
So initially, we had introduced $4 million of the ARPA funding for the municipal sidewalk program, and then at the council's urging and encouragement, we added $500,000 to offer financial assistance to folks for costs associated with sidewalks. So this is already in the ARPA plan and was intended when we introduced the municipal sidewalk program.
That was the question. All right, thank you.
So logistically, how does this work? I owe $20,000 on my sidewalks.
That's a.
And I live in one of those census tracts, which we wanted to get into.
So the way that.
You give me a check for $20,000 and I pay it off?
So we send you a letter that says, hey, counselor, that lives in this qualified census tract. Hey, sir, who lives in a qualified census tract and owes $20,000 on your sidewalk. Home headquarters has this program now to offer financial assistance for people in your situation. Reach out to home headquarters and they will assist you in trying to pay down that remaining balance. So it's not coming from the city in the same way that Urgent Care and Sharp and other programs that the city provides funding to home headquarters for. That check doesn't come from the city. The assistance comes through home headquarters.
What I'm just saying, if he gets a check, you know, there's nothing that prohibits him from spending it. It's not doing something.
It won't go to the individual though.
It goes to the individual.
The check won't be. It won't say like Pat Hogan. It won't go to you.
Just go to the tab, right? That's what I was trying to.
Yeah, like they will go to home headquarters, fill out the application, they'll do all the paperwork, and then they'll send the check there. Just like a contractor, they pay the contractor, not the homeowner.
It's a good thing. I know. I wouldn't have blamed you.
It's like car insurance.
So, in the census tract, this is great, because this will.
Thank you.
More and more questions about, you know, I pay for the sidewalk, I'm still paying for the sidewalk.
Sure.
Everybody's getting free sidewalk and all that. Is there any way we can find one, I want to find one to take care of everybody? That's my opinion. Because I think the way they put the census tracts, what is, the director still there? There's Director Rudd. Director Rudd.
Director Rudd.
You know about our function? I saw
He's
you.
got his coat on.
I just verbally said no. Huh?
What? You want to come up here? I think you're being summoned.
How do they determine what census tracts, one was cited, was about people who were affected by the pandemic as far as employment or job loss?
My understanding is it has to do with the level of poverty, so I think their census tracts with more than 20% people living in poverty. It might be 25, I'm not sure, but.
If you overlap the maps, it's literally the NERSA map that they use for the ARPA. Like, it's almost identical.
It's a little bigger, right? Yeah.
So one of the things I would say, though, is I think a lot of the university neighborhood is included in it by virtue of the students not having income. Like, I think my house is in a distressed census tract, yet much of the university neighborhood is above the median income for the city. So that is a concern for me that, you know, it's paying off people that may not need it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that, you know, we could, I mean, you know, in part, but the fact that this is funded through ARPA, we thought that was, you know, for the most part, most of the money will go to people that that have the greatest need, but there will be, I'm sure, some folks in there that would qualify that may have the means to, be in a better position with the means to pay it off than others.
Isn't it case by case though? When somebody applied home headquarters, they would look at their income, they would, right? Right?
Yeah, I would expect that if they have to demonstrate a hardship.
So, so that could be, if that's one of the changes that council would like to see, we could do it, based on that there needs to be a demonstration of that person's individual ability to pay and not the fact that they live in a census tract, a qualified census tract.
And it usually takes into consideration the AMI as well, like, if a person is well over the 80%, like, if you're making $200,000, you're not gonna get it, like, yeah. Yeah.
certain neighborhoods like Tipperary Hill,
Mhm.
a lot of retired people
Mhm.
aren't working anymore, their income isn't such.
Mhm.
Taking care of their houses and their sidewalks and things like that, but I wouldn't call them well off.
Sure. So, I can take another run at the eligibility requirements, and are there any ARPA implications if we have it based on AMI or income? Same thing.
I just think, I appreciate it, and as long as we keep at least from my perspective, our focus on where this conversation started, and that's seniors and disabled persons living on fixed income.
Mhm.
They're the ones, without a doubt, who can demonstrate.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, and then the other question I had, homeowners, so how do we, is it by virtue of them not having a rental registry, or how do we know it's a homeowner?
Yeah, I think, we did cross-reference it with I believe we did with rental registry, but also if your taxes do not go to the same place as your property, which isn't, there's no 100% accurate way to figure out if something is a rental, but that's usually a pretty good indicator. Some people use P.O. boxes, but, we can address that as it comes up. But, this was properties where the tax billing address does not match the property address.
Okay.
I think you could also probably have them certify that they are, actually
Right,
homeowners.
right. That we would probably use that criteria to do the initial mailing to notify people of it, but then obviously once they engage, in the process, then home headquarters would be able to work with the city to verify that this is not an owner-occupied property.
And then, so the other question is, this $500,000 pot of money, do we know what percentage goes to paying old charges versus
Mhm.
the ongoing fund for the charge, $20 or
Right.
whatever the charge is?
So I would, open to other suggestions, but as I was imagining it, it would probably be a, 300 to 200 split, where the 300 would go towards the folks that have remaining balances, and we would reserve the $200,000 for folks that may have difficulty paying the sidewalk fee once it's assessed. But, and I'm happy to include that in the legislation, but also I think we're curious to see what the response is going to be, whether or not there is a significant demand from folks who qualify, who are in the process of paying off a remaining balance, to see how many folks come forward to say, yes, they would like assistance.
So my opinion on this is I think it'd be helpful if we get the materials and then we can talk internally if there's
Sure.
changes. But
Absolutely.
Finance committee members, do you agree with that approach? Do you want to move this forward as it is, or what's your take on it?
I agree with your proposal.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
All right.
Great. Thank
Sounds
you,
good.
counselors.
Thank you. Okay. That's all for finance.
Afternoon, councillors. John Kivland, Department of Engineering. One item, to amend an existing agreement with CNS Engineers to add the construction inspection phase for $337,000 for the East Brighton Avenue Bridge over the railroad placement project.
So we negotiated an extension.
Yes, correct, councillor.
It's sort of an open-ended agreement as far as.
Yeah, when we select them, we reserve the right to add construction inspection at a later phase. The funding is issued in phases, so once construction inspection phase is issued, then we can negotiate for consultant services.
So is this amended or it's a whole new?
It's amending.
Okay, what was it previously?
Previously, it was $244,000.
Okay.
Any questions? Do you guys agree? No. Are we okay forward this to the agenda?
Yep.
Thank you. Good afternoon. All right, the first item is to amend our subscription fee for our CMMS software. This is the software we're utilizing for all of our work orders for our employees. Instead of doing paper, we're all going digital. This additional fee is for additional storage for a testing site. So as people change roles and positions, they need to learn different parts of the software. So instead of utilizing our data acquisition software and maybe messing up some of our stuff we're acquiring, they can go in a testing site so they can test and make mistakes and it won't mess up our data collection. From our operating budget. Yep. Any questions?
Everybody okay on this one?
Item number 2 is to accept a grant for the Brighton Pump Station project. This was a grant that, we had heard about, but never really kind of came to fruition until just recently. So it's a $500,000 grant to go towards the construction of that project, which we awarded November 9th. Any questions?
Yeah, I think 2 weeks ago, I spoke with the engineering department, and they are working on milling and pavement of the from Thurber to, Brighton to Seneca Turnpike up there. And I think part of the delay to that milling and paving is the work you will be doing plus the scheduling as well. Is there, when is this gonna move? Is it gonna, is the work gonna go soon, or when is this happening?
So we awarded the construction project. We're anticipating construction starting in the spring of next year and probably going through most of the summer. I know engineering has a project scheduled for 2022 or 2023 to repave that section of Brighton and the tail end of Seneca Turnpike up towards the Nob Hill Apartments. So we're going to get our work done ahead of that project. So, we won't be cutting into any new streets. We'll put in the new main, new services, new pump station. And then the next year, probably they'll come in and repave that whole stretch.
Okay, how much of the work that you will do be redo by the mill and paving? Or
there won't be any. There'll be a little bit of overlap because mill and pave will have to take off the top 1.5 to 2 inches of surface pavement. But we're going to bring our stuff up and coordinate with engineering on what they want to see as a finished product. So that way we're not, adding cost to a project that'll just get ripped out.
Okay. Anybody from engineering? Sorry. Anybody from engineering? John, I know that, so far, and I don't know when the I-81 is going to come through. With this work, with what you're doing, with water project, engineering project, mill and paving, Brighton is such a busy street. And I'm wondering how fast we could move to make this happen. Number 2, Brighton is so bad in terms of it, with pothole, with holes everywhere. I don't know if anyone has driven lately on Brighton, but all I'm saying is, when is this project? Can we speed this up? Because I think I spoke with Mary as well. Can we speed this up somehow to get it going quickly? Because the street is horrible. I don't want us to run into, I-81 project, maybe potential. I don't know if it is, they say 2-3 years, But that street is heavily used. When is this? Can we speed it up to move quickly, to pave it, mill and pave it quickly, close to what the water department is doing, rather than wait?
Unfortunately, the mill and pave project is federally funded, and that has a set schedule. It's a design process we have to follow, and the funds are allocated in certain federal fiscal years. So when you follow the design process, it approximately takes about 18 months to 2 years to get through the design process before you're in a position to go into construction. And your funds are usually allocated within those years. If you were able to accelerate the design process, then you'd have to have federal funds in that construction season to obligate those construction funds. Unfortunately, the federal funds are fiscally constrained, so you'd be looking for an offset from another project that couldn't move construction funds.
Yeah.
So we're competing with the county, the state. So we will coordinate with Joe on the pavement treatment so that we're not redoing work that Joe does. Regarding coordination with 81, because our project is a federal aid project, we do coordinate with the state of New York. They do review our plans. So if there's a conflict between the two projects, we'll work that out with the state during the design process.
Could you keep me posted? My interest here is just that, you know, from what I heard, it's probably going to take 2-3 years before Brighton is paved again. And the street is just in a terrible condition. Corey, any ideas?
We can work with DPW on some temporary patching. I mean, this summer we will be doing the bridge just past Ainsley Drive. So the bridge will be under construction this summer. So that we are going to keep traffic flowing during construction, but that most likely traffic will find alternative routes during construction. But we could work with DPW to do some temporary patching on the worst spots.
That would be flexibility. You can't mix revenue streams at all. Once it's designed by the federal people, you can't use federal funding.
You'd lose the federal funding. I mean, if you had the design, you could forego the federal funding.
And we don't want to do that.
Well, we've already started.
We haven't started. We just initiated the process for bonding, entering into an agreement with the state. It's a long project, and since those, if we didn't progress the funds, we'd lose the funds. It's not like the city could move those funds to a different project.
Everybody in competition.
Correct.
No, I get it.
All right, please keep me posted in terms of coordination and maybe making an effort to make sure that at least the street is drivable. It's like you dancing when you drive on that road. No, seriously, that's how bad it is. You know. All right. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that item? All right. Next item. All right.
This is the Office of Temporary Disability Assistance.
Yes. So this is a new program that just kind of came out with the Arpa funds and got passed down to the state to develop a program. And I think they just released it, not with all the details yet, but this is to provide a low-income household with water assistance. So if they're behind on their water bills, they can apply for this grant to get then paid to us directly. I don't know all the details yet because when I talked to the state, they weren't sure on all the details, but I believe there's going to be an online portal and then a paper mail-in application, and then they can submit their water bill that they're behind on, and the state would then reimburse us directly. So it wouldn't go to the bill payer, and that way we wouldn't know if we ever get the money. It would come directly to us to pay their bill off.
So this would be only homeowners, obviously.
So it's residential only, not commercial properties, and it's only for the person whose name the bill is in.
But obviously, there's apartment buildings full of low-income folks too.
Right. So depending on how the apartment building is set up, typically we don't meter every single apartment building. We have a master meter at the parcel.
People who suffer because of landlords paying the water.
That is a possibility, and it's a hard one to answer. But so this is to enter an agreement with the state to enroll into this program. Any questions?
Could when the time comes, could you forward us the information so we can make sure that community groups gets it and people get
Yes, as soon as we get
opportunity.
All this situated, I think we should do some kind of a informational
roll out so people know that this program exists and that they can apply for. All right, the last item we have is our one-year annual agreement with the Cornell Cooperative Extension for the Water Quality Education Program and Farm Bureau Management Services. This is part of our filtration waiver requirement that we do every year. Any question?
I'm just curious, what does it look like, the program? What does education look like?
So this is like, educating the people out on the watershed on what processes, they should be really using, not plowing the fields up the no-till process where they're not causing erosion and that stuff.
Got it. And what's the budget on it?
96,000 and change.
Wow. Yep.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I think we'll get Commissioner of Public Works.
No, I understand. We got things to do. Snow plows to fix. This is just us acquiring a portion of 1600 block of Erie Boulevard East, as we deem it the right of way. So we're just acquiring it.
Any questions? Okay.
Happy holidays,
I'll
guys.
just ask a few questions, keep you here, Commissioner.
Thanks, Commissioner, for sticking around. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
That's it. That's it.
Yes, that's it. Well, that's it for DPW. You want to adjourn?
So, that resolution.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned. So we need a hand guy.